Okay, hey everyone. Let
Hey.
me see, Dave, somehow, yeah, your mic's on now. Good deal.
Yep, we're good.
Yeah, good deal. So we're speaking with Aaron Stark today. He's an attorney in Washington, D.C., and we're going to be talking about the issues with contracts, cancellations, postponements, anything that wedding photographers and event photographers are dealing with in these times. And with me is Dave Moss, who is a photographer in Canada. Dave, want to say hi?
Hello, everybody.
Okay. So we're just gonna have this conversation with Aaron, and Aaron is gonna educate us, and then we have some questions to throw at him, I guess along the way or maybe later. Anyway, Aaron, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, or do you want to go for it?
Hey, everyone. My name is Aaron. I'm an attorney in Washington, D.C. I represent a lot of photographers, and I know this is a very, very trying time for photographers and for their clients as well. It's a completely unpredictable situation. It's obviously changing by the hour, too. And with that, more stress comes with that on how to deal with it. So, my law firm's been getting a lot of inquiries from photographers and actually from other people that are in, clients of photographers about how to handle the situation, whether they can cancel, and if they can cancel, whether they can get all their money back, or if they postpone, if they're gonna charge something extra if they're postponing, whether this is an actual force majeure event, a lot of different, whether the limit of liability clause in photographers' contracts covers them. So a lot of interesting questions coming up and concerns. So I've been helping out a lot of people where I can, and putting a blog out there and answering a lot of questions for photographers. So yeah, I'm really glad that you're doing this so we can get some more of this information out.
Okay, so I wonder if let's try this. Let me ask you. So if in the case, I guess in a wedding contract, there's usually two payments, right? One is at the time of contract signing, and sometimes that's called the retainer or the deposit or whatever it's called.
Right.
And this may be half or a third or a
Right.
small amount to reserve the date and book the photographer. That's what we know it as, right?
Mm-hmm.
A very simple booking fee. And then the final payment is bigger usually, and it comes at the end, maybe a month before the event, 2 weeks, or sometimes at that time.
Right.
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 So in the case that we have the situation where it's a force majeure, and the photographer may or may not have that contract clause in it, and now we have the payment, the deposit, the first payment already paid. So what are the options for the photographer to do?
So so this is kind of an interesting question in that, so you're spot on that there's this initial payment that's but for the most part it can be different, but the general understanding is that this deposit, or a better word for it actually, is booking fee, is used to reserve the photography services on a particular date. It's the money paid for an exchange and promise. So that deposit then, because it is used as consideration to hold that particular date to perform those particular services, it's deemed earned once the photographer stops advertising and stops taking bookings for that date as promised, because they've already been booked by another client. So that is a done deal at that point. And that's why those deposits or booking fees are non-refundable, because the performance has already been completed. So that portion of the contract is fulfilled. Then the other parts are the payments made by the clients toward the photography services. So, and a lot of contracts have this kind of sliding scale, non-refundable payments to compensate the photographer in the event that the client cancels a couple of days before the wedding or something like that.
Are you talking about
because, as you
payment?
can imagine, the second payment, right?
Before we talk about a second payment, can I ask some more about the deposit, the first payment?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right. So if the client cancels the wedding, or the wedding is canceled by circumstances, by force majeure, right? By law, by rules, whatever.
Right.
So if the wedding is canceled because of the client or because of the law,
Mm-hmm.
and the photographer keeps that deposit amount,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. So,
However, if the wedding is still on for some reason, and the photographer doesn't want to cover the wedding because of concerns, health concerns, legal concerns, so should that deposit amount go back to the client?
okay, so two questions. One, to address the force majeure question with the client wanting to cancel. This is the tough part that clients are, don't like to hear, and I wouldn't like to hear either. But and this is, everybody should take this. This is just my interpretation of this, as a lawyer and my knowledge. But other lawyers may have a very different opinion on this, and this may very well need to be decided by a court of law. But under my understanding and my knowledge, the deposit, even under a force majeure circumstance, is non-refundable, because for the same reason that I stated earlier, is that it was already deemed earned because the photographer blocked off that date. So that part of the contract has been performed and it's been earned. So there is nothing to return in terms of the deposit, because it's already been used, rightfully used. So, but then the other question, the sub-question is whether this is actually a force majeure event. So force majeure, it's going to be different, and it's governed by different state laws, and they're going to have their own case law that, defines what a force majeure event is. But for the most part, it has to be unforeseeable and unavoidable. And the thing is while this might be an unforeseeable event, it's not an unavoidable event. Weddings are not time sensitive. They can be rescheduled, and therefore it's not impossible to hold this event at some other time. There may be an instance where it would be literally impossible to have a wedding. But in this situation, it is, that's not necessarily the case. And also, for it to be, if you're really going to make a force majeure argument, you have to be on lockdown, and the wedding has to be happening now, right? I mean, a lot of these weddings that are getting canceled are happening months from now, and we don't know what's going to happen months from now. So you can't really call it a force majeure event, because that would mean may come up. It's not unforeseeable. You actually see that, okay, something may come up and impact my wedding day. So that means I have the availability to reschedule. So I hesitate to call this a force majeure event.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
that's an issue. Yeah.
So there's still some room for interpretation. If this goes to court, there's some room for arguing that it's
right. And I do think the courts are going to be sensitive to this too. I do think, looking at this from a public policy standpoint, I definitely think the courts are going to be sensitive to this, because this is a very scary time. Right. And a lot of times what's interesting is force majeure events are usually localized. It could be because of weather conditions, or, an unfortunate, like a terrorist attack or something, but that's usually localized to one place. And here we're talking about a complete global issue. So I think courts are going to be sensitive to that, but they're also going to look at the facts of whether the wedding was taking place at the time there was a mandatory government, shelter in place in action, things like that. If the wedding is happening months from now, there is no, you can't say that. And then they're also going to say, is it possible to reschedule? And they are likely to be rescheduled. So,
right. Okay.
Yes. What if the client chooses to not reschedule, Aaron? Because we've seen some people who have decided to just cancel their event and then are demanding the back.
So
and they're blaming it on the government, saying the government says we can't have our event. We just
right. And so technically, if the client just decides to cancel and doesn't want to reschedule the event when they very well could, the photographer's cancellation policy comes into play. It's viable. They can blame it on this this pandemic, which is obviously a viable excuse. But if they decide not to reschedule, then the photographer can invoke their cancellation policy, which means that if their wedding was 2 weeks from now, and the photographer had collected all of the money for that, they could theoretically keep it all. But I can go into that in a little bit. But just to go back to stick on the deposit issue, even in that situation, even if there was a force majeure event, the photographer still, in my opinion, can keep that deposit because it's been earned because they held the date. So, but all additional money, that's debatable whether they have the right to keep that. And I can talk about that.
Okay. Well, I still want to ask. So my second question is that
if photographer cancels.
Yeah, if the wedding is still happening for some reason, and the photographer doesn't want to go to the wedding.
Which is what happened. So I'm getting a lot of those questions, and I think if I were a photographer, I would be really nervous about it, and I might think about canceling. But generally, photographers are protected in their contracts by their limit of liability clause, and their limit of liability clause generally says, like I said, all contracts will be different, but they will generally say something to the effect that if the photographer is ill, or cannot make it, or is at risk of serious injury or something to that effect, they will find a replacement photographer. And if neither the photographer nor the replacement photographer can make it to the event, then damage is capped. The limit of liability damage is limited to all the funds that have been paid toward the contract. So the issue there is, okay, well, does that also include the non-refundable retainer? Now, this is where it gets a little tricky, but technically, it's debatable. A lot of the contracts say if the photographer cancels, basically like that, because they're worried about their own health, all money has to be returned except for the non-refundable retainer. Some state that. Some state that all money toward the contract package has to be returned. So then it's debatable whether the contract package includes the non-refundable retainer and all of that. But, most photographers under these circumstances, and especially in situations where I've done contract reviews, at that time, this pandemic was not any in the mind of anyone. This was not foreseeable for anyone. So the idea that a photographer would have to cancel or not make it to a wedding, they were always under the impression that, oh yeah, I would give everything back because that's my job, is to be there. And if for whatever reason I couldn't be there, if I got snowed in or I got sick, of course I would give it back. But now we're in a situation where, this isn't a one-off issue. They might not want to go to several weddings, and that would mean they'd have to, they could not feed their family or pay rent or whatever if they had to give back all of their deposit money. So that's an issue. But real quickly, this is rarely coming up. Clients are trying to use this limited liability clause to get out of it, but this is really to protect the photographer. And every photographer I've talked to, except for a couple, but most of them, they are willing to go anywhere and photograph anything at any time, no matter what. So the idea that they're not going to photograph a wedding isn't going to happen. And so this issue really doesn't come up. But but if there is, then they need to go out and find another photographer to take their place. That's the simple thing about it, and most of them can do that.
Okay. So are there any other issues with the deposits or the booking fee that we can think of that we can address?
Yeah, the other issue is, well, how much is too much for a deposit? And this has kind of come up because most of the time, photographers that don't collect a large amount for a deposit, when they tell their client that, okay, you can cancel, but I'm keeping the deposit, the clients aren't too upset when the deposit isn't very large. Let's say it was, third or quarter or something like that. But when they start charging, 50% of their package price, mm-hmm. which could mean $3,000 or more, clients are sure. upset by that. Sure. They want so question, um, it's
Hold on, Aaron.
it's also looked at customary.
Hold on.
You there?
We had a rough patch right here, so go ahead and repeat that last part again.
Twins.
Oh,
So
wow. How old?
They're 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
Okay, guys.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh,
Okay,
Hold on. I'm not sure what. Are you seeing the share still?
no, the share's not there, but I'm seeing you. There we go.
You seeing me?
No, I just saw you back on the call. Sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You dropped.
Okay. Hold on. Looks like recording is still on. So
Yep.
let's keep talking. It's a little crazy. We got cut off at the end, so the last part I couldn't hear at all. Go ahead and repeat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We were just chit chatting, so I don't know if that's gonna go.
So just a little bit. It wasn't bad.
So, and where we left off is the deposit, where whether it's how much is too much, and
Yes.
I just made the point that clients, photographers that paid a smaller amount likely are not going to be so upset if they realize they can't get their deposit back. But in situations where they've had to pay a larger retainer, generally around 50% or more, that's where you might kind of see some issues. Especially if the contract price is like $6,000 or something like that. So somebody's out $3,000. But that just goes back to my point that photographers that charge that much are worth that much, you could say, and then that's the damage that they would suffer if someone canceled, and that's why they hold the date for you, and that's what the money is for. And it's not out of the customary norms for photographers to have that as their deposit. So but just everybody should take everything with a grain of salt, in a sense that just because something's written in your contract doesn't mean it can't get challenged. And you might come across, and that's what I'm dealing with right now with 2 other clients, where they have great contracts. They're willing to work with their clients and make adjustments and things like that. But these clients still are very upset, and they're willing to, it looks like they may be willing to really challenge them, maybe file an action, a lawsuit against them to try to get more of their money back.
Sure. I know people will use whatever they need to. So is there any room in negotiation of this fee, or is it all or nothing?
Yeah, no, that's one thing I talk to my clients about a lot too, is that, we all run small businesses, and having good client relationships means everything. And especially with photographers, having good reviews and things like that is a big deal. So you might want to think about the cost benefit analysis of whether maybe instead of keeping the full retainer, if that's really the sticking point with their clients, whether you offer half back,
Sure. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it might be something to consider.
So if they reach a settlement if a photographer reaches a settlement with a client, should they do like a brief, short agreement?
Yeah, definitely.
Or something.
So if any contract is canceled or rescheduled, and if any contract is canceled or rescheduled, there should be at least an email confirmation where both, between the photographer and their clients, whoever is a party to the contract, the original contract, acknowledges receipt, and it should state the new terms. So if it's canceled, it should say, this is confirmation that your wedding is canceled, and we will be returning X amount of money back to you. And this resolves any outstanding issues. And then the person on the other end should confirm receipt. Sometimes if a client is really difficult, photographers are concerned that they're going to get bad reviews and things like that. And a lot of times I've stepped in these situations and drafted what's called a settlement agreement. And it basically has the terms of settlement. It also has other terms as a non-disparagement type clause or a confidentiality clause. So that way these things remain private, and they don't have to be worried about the client is going to go online and bash them and things like that. So if that's a concern, that's something that should be included too.
Right, right. So yeah, everything should be spelled out nice and clear so that both sides, there's no misunderstanding, no confusion later.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, anytime you can do that, and it's all, yeah, it should definitely be done that way. And it's all about how you present it to their client too.
Sure.
Obviously, you know, sometimes people are scared if they all of a sudden they get this legal settlement agreement back when they just were just wanting a refund. So it's important to talk to your client. You know, they know this. To talk to your client, let them know, okay, I'm going to refund you, but I really want to get everything clear and spelled out. So I'm going to send you, don't be alarmed, I'm going to send you this agreement that spells it all out. Please review it. Let me know if you have questions, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Right, right. Anything else about that first payment, the booking fee?
No, I mean, I guess no, it is important. I know there's been talk about whether retainer, deposit, booking fee, what should be used. It varies from contract to contract. There's a lot of debate about it. I know certain terms, retainer has a certain legal term and all this, but what's really important, you know, we're advising now to use booking fee. So I'm talking to other clients and say, okay, booking fee is probably more clear, but it doesn't matter. What is the most important part is that the contract states this is for reserving the date, you know, that show that this deposit is for that, and we will turn away other business because you've booked this with us. This is what this portion is for. Something along those lines. So is important to have in your contract.
Okay, great, great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now should we move on to the second payment?
Sure.
Okay, so what issues are you seeing with photographer, or, you know, I guess.
Well, I've seen a lot of stuff from photographers online that most of anybody that's come my way is not doing this, but I've seen a lot of talk online about, okay, so if they cancel, let's say the wedding is next week and they cancel now, technically under the cancellation policy, most part under a lot of these contracts, full payment is due. And most clients have already paid in full by that point. And so some photographers think that they can just keep it all, you know, like it's a windfall. I think that is horrible business to do. First of all, just on a moral standpoint, I think it's horrible business to keep it all, to keep it all as if you performed entirely on their contract. And I advise all my clients to not do that. I do understand though that people were counting on that, and it's obviously, you know, they use it to live off of. I get that, but it is a contract and you do have to perform on it too. It cuts both ways. You get money because you're supposed to provide a service. If you don't provide the service, then you shouldn't get the money. That's kind of the basic part of it. Mm-hmm. But I'm not saying give back the deposit. Like, notice that's different. But the second payment. The issue also is that, one, if you're going to keep it all, be prepared that someone's going to really try to come after you to get it back. I would. But also, this is where you're going to see a lot of the force majeure stuff. And even though I made the argument that this isn't technically a force majeure event, there is enough going on, I think, to say, you know what, court, if this were in court, it is completely unconscionable to have a contract term so weighted in favor of one party, where something like this, a pandemic where there's thousands of people being killed, and I can't go to have my wedding because I'm worried about my grandparents, I'm worried about my own safety, and the photographer or whoever else gets to keep the entire amount of the contract without ever having to take one photo. That is unconscionable. And I think that's a really strong argument. I don't see courts saying, yeah, you know, this photographer should keep $10,000, even though they didn't take one single picture. Sure. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think people who think that, they are, you know, it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just not viable. It's just not, you know, because contracts are not. The law in general tries to be fair too, and they're going to look at that, you know, from all angles.
But if you know, like it could be an out-of-town wedding where you already bought the plane ticket for it, and you know, made a hotel reservation that's non-refundable, and expenses have been incurred, and it's fair to to get paid for those expenses, right?
Oh, entirely too. But then, you're also, so then, how many of those expenses can be refundable? Most of them right now can be, right? The hotels,
Sure.
I had a trip planned with hotel, even through one of these third party people that they refunded because of this situation. So yeah, I mean, that is true. And then and some photographers also do portrait sessions or engagement sessions and things like that before the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those things need to be talked about. And this is where having a good client communication is really vital, because you need to be able to tell your client, listen, technically I could keep all, under the contract terms, it states this is non-refundable. However, I'm not going to do that in this situation, clearly. But I did do an engagement session for you. You do get photos for that. There needs to be compensation for that, clearly. The deposit is non-refundable, unfortunately, because we held the date for you. We're happy to put that toward another date and make, maybe change that date again for you if need be. So you can negotiate this with your clients for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But, I've seen people online say, oh, free, payday for me. Like that, I don't know, that is just, it's not good.
I know. I don't think we see too many of that. Let's hope we don't.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, let's hope not, for sure. Because I think most people should be understanding this entire situation though too. And I have come across contracts that state under any circumstance, force majeure, act of God, all this and that, nothing is refundable. And like I said, I've advised them that this is likely to be an unconscionable term in your contract. Obviously you can keep it in there, but my advice is you don't. And it could be something that someone will challenge later. So.
Okay. So anything else about the second payment?
Well, another thing that's come up about the second payment, and actually this kind of goes back to the deposit too, is someone said in an issue I'm dealing with that, oh, well, you said you were holding the date for me and all this, and it's not refundable, but you wouldn't be able to come photograph it anyway. Nobody's going to want that date anyway. Which is somewhat true, but people have to, this is why this is a really interesting situation that we're in, because it changes by the hour. Yeah, maybe no one would want that to book that date now. So you shouldn't be keeping anything for just holding a date that no one's going to want to book anyway. But at the time of the contract, that date was sought after. And maybe even 2 weeks ago, that date might have been sought after too, but things change by the day. So that's why it's important to spell out in the contract that, what is non-refundable, why is it non-refundable, and to really encourage clients to that while that date is probably not practical to have a wedding, we can always reschedule.
Yeah. So I guess I imagine that. Okay.
What?
So I guess that I guess in going forward, we will probably want to revisit what contracts are and what and how sensible it can be, or write in a way that makes sense to everyone. But maybe that's the future, right? For future weddings.
Yeah, I mean, and some people are asking, how do can they go back and change the contract now and kind of address this issue that we're in? And if people want to make addendums to their contract, then most contracts state the process for that, and it's usually that addendums and revisions can be made, but it must be agreed upon by both parties and in writing and all that. So people can go back and kind of address that. What I think is a good thing to do is to be proactive and send out like a general statement to all clients that have weddings booked for this year, and say basically that they know this is a trying time. They know that there's possibility of rescheduling and cancellations, and let people know that even though, because a lot of contracts, by the way, even for rescheduling, sometimes there's a fee involved, or sometimes everything becomes due at that point for them to reschedule and stuff like that. Or people are subject to increased pricing if they reschedule a year further out than their original date. So, but what they might want to do is think about what they might want to give to their clients. So we just drafted a statement for a photographer that essentially says that we're not going to hold any client to our rescheduling or cancellation policy. That if clients want to reschedule, we're willing to there's a rescheduling fee that they had, not do the rescheduling fee, to make multiple change of dates. If, assuming the photographer is available, the contract price will stay the same. So that sort of thing, to let people know, put clients at ease that is a possibility. And then we address the cancellation, that if the client does choose to cancel the wedding, everything will be returned except the retainer, and we remind them why the retainer is non-refundable. And then we also encourage again that it should be rescheduled, that although this is a scary event, an unpredictable event, it can be rescheduled. It's not a time-sensitive event. Mm-hmm. So we hope that they do reschedule. And then also to kind of give an end date. Like, this is effective now and will be effective until July. So that way there's an end date to this new sort of policy. Because you had asked the question if photographers have to stick to their agreements. And I mean, technically, yes, but also if they're offering something better than the agreed upon terms of their contract, I don't think any client would be upset by that. So, all
right. So can you put that in a case scenario? Like if a client has a wedding in July, right?
Right.
And so what you're saying now would be a good time for photographers to reach out to July, August, September, October clients and spell out their options and give them a deadline for any changes they might want.
Right, and for however far they want to go in advance with their weddings. Yeah, how far they're willing to have this policy in place.
I've got a template that I can share with your community as well. That it doesn't have an end date on it, but it could be easily added in. But I have a template that we've sent out to all of our wedding clients for this year, basically stating that, like, here are your options. Here's what we're willing to do. Here's what we're not willing to do, et cetera, et cetera.
That's great.
Yeah, I've been sharing it with lots of people. And we had a couple in July who half their guest list was coming from mainland China, and they weren't sure if their guests were going to be able to get here even at that point in time. So they've already pushed their wedding to June next year.
Yeah. And it's good to be proactive. I think clients appreciate that. It puts them at ease.
Yeah. And that's exactly the reason why I wanted to do it. Is like, if I was getting married right now, I would just want to know what my options are.
Mm-hmm. And then you can already address the retainer issue and all those things ahead of time and kind of give people, heads up.
Yeah. Which we had done. We said that, like, this is the part that would be non-refundable in the event that you canceled and stuff like that. Aaron, in regards of a contract change, like, say somebody does change the date and they move to a new date, is there any specific language that you need to have in your contract that says that this is the new contract, like that the old contract is? Do you need to do like a cancellation of the old contract or anything like that?
So no, you don't need to null and void the old contract, but you do need to have some sort of confirmation that this is an addendum to the original contract entered in on X date, that both parties are agreeing to reschedule the photography services to be performed on X new date. Everything else in the contract still applies. So it basically basically an addendum. Some people could even cross it out, initial it or whatever, but I know everything is done. Obviously, all these contracts are usually done through through online or whatever Acrobat Reader. So yeah, you would just, I think generally is the best way to do it is to send a confirmation email to the client and make sure that they confirm receipt, and then you're good to go.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Aaron, I guess I'm thinking of a case where the client wants to postpone the wedding but don't know when the wedding will be.
Yes.
So they want to hang on to the deposit, and they want to book the same photographer, right? So they just want to, I don't know when, but I need you to be ready whenever that is.
I know, and that's what so now I'm getting these because I've done so many contracts and contract reviews, and that is a situation that most contracts that are drafted, we draft, and there is a date period where someone can reschedule the date. So they can say, you can reschedule up to a year or something like that.
Right.
Otherwise, you're subject to increase in certain, fees, my prices might go up, that sort of thing. And we always make sure that no matter what, rescheduling, client has to be responsible for travel expenses, for the change of travel dates and hotel fees and rescheduling, all that stuff. So all that stuff goes in our contracts. But yeah, that is an issue, right? Because people kind of don't know when, because who knows when this is really going to end. It really is. It sucks. Yeah, that is something that I don't really have any clear advice on, honestly. I think photographers just kind of have to do what they think is best, and be, try to be as accommodating as possible. But yeah, some photographers don't even want to photograph. What if somebody wants to get married 3 years from now? I mean, who knows whether the photographer really wants to do a wedding that time? So they might want to. I would probably say it's got to be made within a year. Otherwise, if you don't do it within a year, if we just don't pick a date, then you can hold it, but we'll need to revisit this. I can't guarantee. We can't really guarantee anything. I think a date really does have to be picked. Okay. I don't think people need to do it now, but I think they should probably tell the client, you need to do this you at least need to pick a date within a year. Maybe not, sure, the date doesn't have to fall within the year, but they need to pick something within that time period. Yeah. But yeah, those are a scenario that people have to think through. And like I said too, that this is really bad, but at the same time, this is also really unprecedented. So people are trying to figure things out as these issues come up. You can't, no matter how good your lawyer is, or how good your contract is, or whatever, you can't predict every single issue. And plus, there's just a client element to everything. Yeah. So you gotta try to work with them, but try to be as transparent and clear as possible on what you hope to get out of it. And
yeah. What about change of scope? Like if they were going to book a wedding and now they're unsure about travel and stuff like that, so they're going to reschedule, but they want to change it to an elopement instead of a full wedding. Would that become a whole new contract, or could that be an addendum as well?
So it could be the scope can definitely change, and it wouldn't be a whole new. You don't necessarily need a whole new contract, but it could change because everything else in your contract is somewhat boilerplate, I guess. All those other clauses are still going to apply. But if they're going to change the scope, then that might change the price of the package and all that. Then you need to, you need to address all of that. But they have to know, though, even if they change the scope, the deposit is what it is, because at the time of they booked you, it was for this particular wedding package, and that's what you turned away, for other potential customers, by booking them. So that likely is not going to change. So, they have to think about that. They may not want to change the scope because maybe whatever they change it to would be less than the overall deposit. I don't know. Possible about that. So, but you wouldn't necessarily need a new contract. You just keep everything and just change the scope and change the price. But those are going to be things that you do individually with each client.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let me ask about doing things individually with each client. Should photographers, either strictly enforce their contracts, or can they work with each client on a case-by-case basis? I mean, legally speaking.
Yeah, definitely. They can work with each. It's good, like we're talking about, to send out a policy if you want to try to remain consistent with everybody and avoid clients asking for different things. And that is helpful too if you also have a team of photographers, because everybody's on the same page. This is just what we're doing, type of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to fall back on that too. Hey, this is our policy, our new policy. But yeah, you can also work. Of course, you can work with clients individually too. Some clients may just be really sympathetic in terms of the situation that they're
in. What I mean is, like, in a court of law, I just wonder if one client might point out, one client might claim that the photographer, didn't enforce the policy for another client, and now they're applying to them, right?
So all contracts, most of the time, these contracts have an enforceability type clause, which basically says if a particular section or clause of this agreement was not enforced, it doesn't render everything else voidable, doesn't void the contract itself. So yes, sometimes people choose not to enforce certain parts of their agreement, but it doesn't mean that everything else doesn't stand. And just because one photographer does something different with one client than another client, that client can't use that as evidence to say you should be doing the same thing with me, because they're free to, these are all separate individual agreements. It's not a group of, so they're free to do whatever they want with one client as opposed to the other. It's a completely separate party, and they're free to do that.
Exactly. That's exactly what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So are you, wait, so when we're speaking about these contracts, we're speaking about laws in the United States, right? Only?
Yeah. So because most these contracts have a jurisdictional clause, and they state what law applies. Generally, it's the law that the photographer's principal place of business is based in. And also states a jurisdiction where if there was a dispute where a lawsuit could be brought, or there might be an arbitration clause. So whether they bypass the lawsuit part and they just do arbitration, but it would spell that out in the contract. So that's the law that applies. So that means that if you have a client in Florida and the photographer is based in New York, and the Florida client is saying that they should be able to cancel based off force majeure because Florida law states X, Y, and Z. That doesn't really matter, because if the contract states that this contract is going to be governed by New York law, then everybody has to look to New York to see what the definition is of force majeure is, and or the doctrine of impossibility or something like that. They're going to look to whatever law governs the contract, and that law is generally stated in the contract itself.
What if it's not?
If it's not, then they look to they look at a couple different things. I mean, this is like a whole civil procedure law class based on this, but generally they look at the points of contact. So they're going to really look where the injury is.
Wow.
So the injury, and that's debatable who's injured in this. So it could be Florida, it could be New York, it could be the client. So and especially in a situation like this, where there's a global sort of issue where everybody's kind of suffering, like the issue with this coronavirus, and it's imposing restrictions on almost every state. But anyway, that would be debatable, and that is a huge issue in a lot of cases where what law applies and where the case should be brought. Okay. So it is important to have in your contract. But generally they look to where the injury is, where it was going to take place sometimes. So it would be debated, really. If I were representing the photographer, and they filed in New York or filed in Florida, going back to my example, the first thing we would do is ask for a change in venue. So you're always going to and say it should be brought where the photographer is. That would be just a strategy thing we would do. But anyway, just real quickly too, you'll never have a problem bringing a lawsuit against someone if you bring it where they live. So there's jurisdiction's always good about that, unless it's stated differently in the contract, but assuming it's not stated. So people might, likely if it wasn't stated, it really should be brought where the photographer lives, if the client is the one trying to sue.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask that this whole discussion that we're having is basically American law, right? If a European photographer will probably not have some of the issues are probably not relevant to a European because they may have a different contract law.
Right, and contract law, but general principles of contract law are maybe applicable to other countries. The idea of a contract, promise for consideration, all those basics to a contract are pretty similar in every country. So there's going to be a lot of similarity, I think, too, when it comes to contract law. But definitely people, and even in the U.S., if there's an issue, they should talk to a lawyer. They should, and the lawyer is going to look at their particular state and laws and jurisdiction, things like that. But most contracts too, you only have to look. I mean, you look as far as the contract, because a lot of times the contract states what needs to happen.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So this advice that you've been giving, that we talked about, it can benefit anyone.
Well, yeah, because anyone's going to deal with a cancellation. Anyone's going to deal with rescheduling. Anyone's going to look, and no matter where you're at, you should look at your own contract and see what it says. They're going to be very similar in different countries too. But yeah, that's just a good starting point, is to even look at your own contract, understand what it says, understand if you're protected under these situations. Look to see if you have a rescheduling policy. Look to see if you have a cancellation policy. Look to see if you have a limit of liability clause. All those things should be in any contract, no matter where you live.
Yeah, definitely a time to revisit the contract and work on the contract for future clients.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've been offering some free consultations. I've been reaching out to a lot of my clients that I've reviewed contracts for preemptively, just to see if they have any questions about it. A lot of my old clients have come to me asking just clarification questions, because this is just a weird, unpredictable, scary time. People don't really know what to do.
Sure.
So there's a lot of unknowns, and we're trying to get information out there to photographers as much as possible, like doing this for sure, to kind of help people figure out what to do. And it's weird, what we're talking about now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen next week? So I don't know. So yeah.
Hey, Dave, do you have any more questions?
I have a bit of an oddball question, and it may be more of an insurance question than a contract question, but it came up and I didn't have an answer for it for one of my clients. She was just wondering, what does it look like for liability for a photographer? Say you're out shooting a wedding or a family session or whatever, and you cough or sneeze, and then someone at that event says, oh, well, that photographer coughed and now I have coronavirus, and so they're liable. Is that just covered under a liability insurance thing? Is that—
Gosh, that is such an interesting question. And that's what I mean, how this has kind of become an unpredictable scenario. Yeah, right. Like, what if the photographer had coronavirus and didn't know it, and they show up at the wedding to photograph it and does get, I mean, maybe because in your situation, it's possible maybe the person had coronavirus and the coughing didn't play a part, wasn't a factor in that. But what if it turns out they did? That's an interesting question. I don't think law, like breaking this down, that is like what you call a slippery slope. I don't think the law in this situation would ever that would be at fault for getting someone else sick. I think that's kind of an assumed risk in anything you do. By just going out in the public, you risk being sick. So, because then by that means, like, what if I send my kid to daycare and they get sick? Can I sue the daycare for them getting sick? I mean, I haven't seen any lawsuits about stuff like that with other diseases. So I don't see that really happening. But, there is, I guess you could make a claim for negligence, that if the person knew they were sick, knew it, and I mean, and not just but a sickness that could cause, serious injury or death, and they put themselves in a situation that would likely expose other people to that, then yeah, there is case law about that. That's like where people who might have HIV and they knowing that and have, sex with someone else and give it to someone else, knowing that there are laws about that, to protect those people who are victims of that, especially if it's done either negligently or purposefully too. So yeah, that is a situation. But if anybody went there unknowingly and photographed an event, I don't. For one, you'd have to show causation. That'd be tough. Like, you'd have to show that, but for this person being at the wedding, they would not have got coronavirus. And who knows? How do you prove that? That would be something that I think would be nearly impossible to prove. But if there was some sort of evidence that's like, maybe the person was online, hey, I got coronavirus, I'm going to go to this wedding and photograph it anyway. Ha ha ha. I hope nobody stands around me. If they had evidence like that, then yeah, there could be some negligent liability there for sure. So yeah, that basically if there's knowledge about it, I think you should watch. But I think any accidental stuff, anything like that, no, that just, I don't think there's any. It is interesting. It's come across my way, but I without looking into a ton of cases about stuff like this where there's been diseases and somebody contracting a disease from somebody else unknowingly, that the person had it. I could just see that being a huge issue. Where's the end point in that?
Sure. Stop. Yeah, got it.
So.
Hey, Dave, you want to spell out your email for people who want to get that from you?
To get the email, I'll just post it in the Fearless Together group. I can just share it as a file directly.
Sure. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, but maybe somebody who listens to this won't have access to that. Just
if they want to reach out to me, probably the easiest way to do it is just dave@davemosscoaching.com. So DAVE@DAVEMOSSCOACHING.com.
Cool. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Wade. Thanks, Dave. I mean, I really enjoyed this, and I think it's good information to get out. So
it's really, really helpful. Thanks so much.
Yeah, but stay on for a minute, okay? I'm gonna ask you one more thing. So, okay, everybody, thank you.